New indications President Obama may be reversing course on his stated goal of getting U.S. troops out of Iraq and keeping U.S. troops out of Syria. The apparent shift comes just days after the first known American combat fatality in the war against ISIS.
The Obama administration has confused almost everybody with its statements on the fight against ISIL. It's been saying over and over U.S. forces were not engaged in combat operations. But if that were the case, how could a U.S. soldier die in action, which is what happened last week? There are more and more of these questions as many see that actions don't match the words. Here's how Defense Secretary Ash Carter responded.
Won't hold back from supporting capable partners in opportunistic attacks against ISIL or conducting such missions directly, whether by strikes from the air or direct action on the ground.
Washington's actions in Iraq today also fly in the face of U.S. officials' earlier statements that they would not put American boots on the ground.
I will not put American boots on the ground in Syria. I will not pursue an open-ended action like Iraq or Afghanistan.
The resolution we've submitted today does not call for the deployment of U.S. ground combat forces to Iraq. It is not the authorization of another ground war.
We are not obviously contemplating returning. We're not contemplating putting boots on the ground.
President Obama has been very clear that American combat troops are not going to be fighting in Iraq again.
Surprises in U.S. policy statements don't stop there. Washington has maintained for some time that Russia is bombing the wrong people in Syria. John McCain at the Senate Armed Services Committee hearing with Ash Carter pressed him to say that Russia is bombing U.S.-trained rebels. Here's what he got.
I'm asking the question about some of those we trained and equipped moderate Syrian forces that are now being bombed by Russia.
With respect to the Title X forces that the Department of Defense trains and equips in Syria, they have not come under attack, but we have expressed...
None of the moderate forces, that some of whom we have trained, have come under attack by Russia from the air?
Not in our train and equip program, our Title X program, no.
It's fascinating.
In a move that will put U.S. ground troops closer to combat in Iraq and Syria, the president is weighing recommendations from the Pentagon to ramp up military strategy against ISIS.
We expect to intensify our air campaign, including with additional U.S. and coalition aircraft, to target ISIL with a higher and heavier rate of strikes.
There will be more U.S. Special Operations raids like the hostage rescue last week involving Delta Force operators embedded with Kurdish fighters, which left an American soldier dead.
He was killed in combat. That wasn't the intent, obviously. He was accompanying those forces.
The White House said today the president is not authorizing large-scale ground forces like he did in Afghanistan. The new chairman of the Joint Chiefs says he would recommend embedding U.S. troops with the Iraqis.
After talking to the commanders on the ground, I believe we'll have an opportunity to reinforce Iraqi success in the days ahead. We've developed a variety of options to do that.
The hearing got testy when Senator John McCain asked why there still aren't plans for a no-fly zone in Syria.
It is not a new issue. It is a substantial military
undertaking. So it seems to me you should have a position on it.
We do not have a concept of operations for a no-fly zone at this time that we're prepared.
After all these years, we don't have a concept of operations
that we're prepared to recommend.
Because the White House does not want to confront Russia in the skies over Syria, which led to this admission from the president's top military advisor.
I think the balance of forces right now are in Assad's advantage.
So what you've done, gentlemen, along with the president, is you've turned Syria over to Russia and Iran. This is a half-assed strategy at best.
Meanwhile, a U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer, the USS Lassen, sailed within 12 nautical miles of the artificial Spratly Islands in the South China Sea, eliciting an angry response from China.
The U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter confirms the United States conducted naval operations inside a 12 nautical mile zone around islands in the South China Sea. They are claimed by China, and the action drew immediate condemnation from Beijing. China is accusing the U.S. of provocation, threatening Chinese sovereignty and taking sides in territorial disputes in the South China Sea.
Tensions are rising even higher. The U.S. warship Lassen sailed into waters of China's Nansha Islands, also known as the Spratly Islands. China calls it a deliberate provocation.
美方有关行为 Such action by the U.S. side threatened China's national sovereignty and security, endangered the safety of personnel and facilities on the related islands and the safety of Chinese fishermen's normal operations, and damaged the regional peace and stability. We expressed our resolute opposition and solemn protest.
China has been carrying out construction in some of the reefs and islands, including the Juby Reef, which the USS Lesson sailed close to. The U.S. calls these artificial islands and does not recognize China's territorial rights.
We have said, and we are acting on the basis of saying that we will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law permits.
Did we send a destroyer yesterday inside the 12-mile zone of one of the...
that? There have been naval operations in that region in recent days.
The U.S. Defense Secretary did not provide much in the way of details, but after months of hints, the guided missile destroyer USS Lesson passed into the waters of a small island called Juby Jiao by China or Subi Reef by the U.S. Reaction from China has been swift and strong. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi issued this statement, saying, "We advise the U.S. to think again and before acting, not act blindly or make trouble out of nothing." China's Navy spokesman said China will protect its rights in the area, saying, quote, "The Chinese Navy will resolutely perform duties and missions to unswervingly safeguard national sovereignty, maritime rights and interests, and peace and stability in the South China Sea." Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang strongly criticized the move. He stressed that China will take any necessary measures in the future.
China firmly opposes provocation from any country. We will continue to closely monitor the relevant maritime area and airspace and take any measure that is necessary. The U.S. should not take any dangerous and provocative action that would threaten Chinese sovereignty and safety. It should abide by its commitment that it will not take sides on China's territorial disputes to avoid further damage to China-U.S. relations and regional peace and stability.
China takes the reclamation as natural extensions of insular features and says the U.S. is muddying the waters. Many Chinese believe the foray is meant to show U.S. dominance.
Main purpose for the United States to conduct its rebalance to Asia-Pacific is to use South China Sea issue contain China.
China also criticized the U.S. for the militarization of territorial disputes.
We strongly urge the U.S. side to earnestly respect China's national sovereignty and security concerns, properly cope with divergences to follow the principle of no conflict, mutual trust, win-win cooperation, take concrete measures to correct wrongdoings, and prevent such incidents from happening again.
For now, Chinese vessels continue their routine patrols of the area.
China is reacting strongly over the U.S. military warships patrol in the Nansha Islands. It sends a warning to the U.S. about its new military attempts at involvement in the South China Sea disputes. Still, the U.S. says such patrols is what is called freedom of navigation and could become frequent. This new situation presents a new test to the U.S.-China military relations over the troubled waters.
This is bad. A new inspection on Iran's most dangerous nuclear facility shows an important piece of equipment is missing. Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington. Catherine, what is this all about?
Well, Greta, Parchin is one of Iran's most secretive military sites, and it was just last month that inspectors were moved in, or allowed to go in. And according to our contact, what they found is that equipment is missing, as well as what's called a containment vessel. This is a special chamber where they are able to test detonators to trigger warheads. And what Iran's got to answer now is why they chose to renovate an empty building over and over again, and whether this was really an effort to sanitize the kind of progress they had made with their nuclear weapons program. Greta,
how do we find this out? I mean, is this one of the? Is this an inspection by IAEA? Is this Iran being honest, or is this just sources?
Based on my reporting, the IAEA found that the containment vessel and the equipment was missing when they were able to get into Parchin for the first time ever last month. And they were able to get in as part of this effort to establish a baseline, which is part of the nuclear deal framework.
All right. Is President Obama speaking out? I mean, is this going to make a big deal to President Obama?
This is very important to the deal because the IAEA report is expected in December, and it's supposed to lay out Iran's past and present program. It's the way forward if sanctions are going to be lifted. And what critics are telling Fox News is that the missing equipment really represents a gap in the data, and the information is now incomplete. So it's hard to make a real assessment on whether Iran has made significant progress on its program and whether it really is right to lift the sanctions. And there's such a tight timeline now that to thoroughly investigate this, according to a former inspector, is virtually impossible.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Yuki Amano, says Iran has met its commitments under the July nuclear agreement. He made the comments in an interview with the Spanish newspaper El País. Amano also referred to samples taken from Iran's Parchin military site. He said the samples are currently being tested. Iran and the IAEA signed a roadmap agreement back in July about the country's nuclear program. The agreement allows the agency to evaluate Iran's present and past nuclear activities. The IAEA has said that Tehran provided the agency with whatever is necessary to evaluate its activities.
President Obama is making Iran an even bigger player on the world stage than it already is. The Iranians say they will attend international peace talks on Syria Friday after the U.S. gave the green light to their participation. Correspondent Kevin Cork reports tonight from the White House.
Just ahead of another round of diplomatic talks over the fate of Syria, Secretary of State John Kerry today urged patience as the complicated international role in the war-torn country's future continues to unfold.
The best opportunity we have is to try to come to the table and recognize there has to be the political solution that everybody has talked about.
The debate comes as the U.S. and its allies seek to end Syria's bloody four-year civil war and bring about a transition out of power for President Bashar al-Assad. Joining the U.S. for talks in Vienna will be Russia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and for the first time, Iran.
We actually all agree that the status quo is untenable. We all agree that we need to find a way to have a political solution.
But a solution has been elusive. Critics say the failure to topple Assad is but one of several foreign policy blunders for the Obama White House in Syria. They cite the failure to act after Assad crossed the so-called red line, the failed attempt to train Syrian rebels, and a lack of sustained success against ISIS there.
We've been absolutely absorbed by the crises in the region, such as ISIL in Syria and in Libya, and we have been unable in many respects to implement successfully these longer-term strategies.
Further complicating matters, today's revelation from Western intelligence sources that the Russians have been helping the Iranians deliver weapons into Syria. 2 cargo flights a day for the past 10 days, said to be coordinated by Iranian Quds commander Qasem Soleimani, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and his defense minister. It's a breach of 2 UN Security Council resolutions, raising questions about why the administration would invite Tehran to the negotiation table.
Iran has accepted an invitation to attend this week's discussions in Vienna. It's the first time Tehran will be participating. CCTV's Jim Spellman joins us live in the newsroom. Jim, this is pretty significant.
It really is, but though the Iranians will join the negotiations, some of the key players, the Syrian government and the opposition groups, won't be at the table.
As the conflict in Syria continues, new hope for a diplomatic solution. For the first time, Iran will join talks with the U.S. and Russia, plus Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and others. The negotiations center on what role President Bashar al-Assad might play in Syria's future. The U.S. and its coalition partners say they can only accept a short-term transitional role for Assad. Russia and Iran say Assad must be part of the transition, and the Syrian people should choose their leaders.
We believe that the solution in Syria is only a political solution. Americans and foreign players in Syria have no choice but to accept the realities in Syria. Mr. Bashar Assad and the Syrian government have the necessary readiness for talks with insurgents who are committed to a political path.
Neither those insurgents, the Syrian opposition, nor the Bashar al-Assad-led government are expected to participate in the talks. But that may change if negotiations make progress.
All Syrian opposition groups that care about the fate of their state should be represented. We're working on this too, and our partners, some of our partners, cannot clarify how they see the solution of this issue. It's important to abandon attempts to choose someone as a convenient partner and to promote him as a representative of the whole opposition group.
The U.S. welcomes Iran's participation, which comes on the heels of the historic Iran nuclear deal negotiated with Russia, the U.S., China, and others. The talks come after Russia had some of its busiest days since beginning airstrikes in Syria a month ago, carrying out 118 strikes in just 2 days.
Russia says its warplanes have hit 118 terrorist targets in Syria over the past 24 hours. Russia's defense ministry says the terrorist sites came under attack during more than 70 sorties over the province of Idlib, Homs, Hama, Aleppo, Damascus, and Latakia. This has been the highest one-day tally since Moscow began its bombing campaign in Syria last month. The Kremlin attributes the rise in the attacks to fresh intelligence, saying that the targets were confirmed via various channels. The terrorist sites belong to Al-Qaeda affiliate, the Al-Nusra Front, as well as Jaish al-Islam. Russia's air campaign, which is being launched on Syria's request, has come under criticism by the West.
The U.S. Navy has intercepted Russian surveillance planes flying near a U.S. aircraft carrier off the Korean peninsula. The White House says Russian aircraft, which flew close to the USS Ronald Reagan, were escorted by 4 F-A-18 warplanes. The incident happened during a joint military exercise between the U.S. and South Korea. U.S. officials say 2 Russian Tu-142 Bear aircraft flew within a nautical mile of the aircraft carrier. The White House spokesman said the encounter did not result in significant confrontation. Tensions between the United States and Russia have heightened over a range of issues, including NATO's eastward expansion, the crisis in Ukraine, and the war in Syria.
We begin tonight with the mystery for hours today and the concern. F-16s scrambled up and down the coast when a military blimp broke free, tearing loose, floating away. This is what it looks like, a giant high-tech airship, 240 feet long, $175 million in your tax money. And this is what it looked like floating over a school. Later spotted floating over a neighborhood, crashing through power lines, knocking out power. And here's the path it took, breaking away from the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, floating across Pennsylvania, and then coming down in Moreland Township. ABC's Lindsay Davis on the scene tonight, where they're now warning the community, and many asking, how does a military blimp break free in the first place?
For hours today, a mystery. Just where was the $175 million military blimp?
Yeah, and it knocked down our power at school, and it knocked down all Columbia's power.
12:20 p.m., the blimp comes unhinged, detaching from its station at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, traveling north 16,000 feet in the air, floating into Pennsylvania.
It's going to land right in the cornfield.
The blimp floating over a high school in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh my God, it's going down.
Dragging a long metal tether, a cable several thousand feet long, wiping out power lines along the way.
Lights out for us at Fowlersville and 47. So you lost power out there also. Route 11's dead.
Listen to this neighbor's recording from the ground.
Whatever this thing is doesn't appear to be attached to anything. There's a line dragging.
The top secret balloon cost $175 million. The program, more than $2 billion. The balloon is equipped with high-tech radar and early warning system that can search an area the size of Texas for incoming cruise missiles, unfriendly aircraft, even tanks on the ground. It's filled with helium, 242 feet long, 3/4 of a football field. The Secretary of Defense today telling reporters he's seen these balloons break free in Afghanistan, something that can happen in bad weather. Retired Colonel Stephen Ganyard saying, make no mistake, it was a lot of taxpayer money floating for much of the afternoon.
So this protects the national capital region, but it's a very sophisticated military technology, very classified. It's the best capability in the world.
Shortly before touching down, the tail fell off a 1/4 mile away from the massive balloon's final resting place in Moreland Township, Pennsylvania, just after 4 p.m. A 150-plus mile journey from that base in Maryland, sending F-16s in the air and officials on the ground scrambling. It was not far from here in Columbia County, Pennsylvania, where the aerostat started to deflate on its own. And now a warning from officials for people to stay away from the balloon, even with it now back on the ground.
We've just turned around some sound. This is from the air traffic control tower regarding this particular plane. Let's roll it.
Okay, hold short of there, Tango 1, contact ramp on 118.17. Let him know that you need to go back to the gate. Okay, hold short, Tango 1, and we'll contact ramp. Engines on fire, engines on fire! Engines on fire, we're calling the fire rescue right now.
Miles, do me a favor, weigh in on what you just heard. And also, I'm just curious, I would imagine if according to these reports, you know, the pilot of this plane traveling behind reported seeing fuel leaking. Don't they do walk-arounds? How was this not caught ahead of time?
Well, certainly if they were doing the walk-around, they saw fuel leaking, that would have been something you catch for sure. But what you have to think about is, on those walk-arounds, it's not like they're opening up the cowling of the engine. And even if they did open it up and looked at all the fans and all the connections, there might have been a perfectly fine-looking connection which gave way when they tried to start the engine, which is typically what would have been happening as they were taxiing toward the runway. So, you know, generally you start out with one engine going, and then you fire up the second one as you get closer to your clearance for takeoff, all part of just a fuel-saving measure. So it's quite possible this all kind of transpired in the process of starting up that engine. They wouldn't necessarily know from, there wouldn't be any indication in the cockpit that the fuel was leaking. There's no indication of that. I mean, eventually, I suppose you'd see the gauges go down, but that would take a little while. A fire you would get some indications of, but it's obviously, in this case, was very helpful that other pilots got on the radio and said, hey, you've got fuel leaking. They were already on their way, apparently had made the decision to go back when the fire began.
I was sitting on seat number 12A. I heard a loud bang. Turned around, saw the lights, saw flames, ran to the front of the aircraft. There was already people starting to get up. The stewardess calmly, very calmly, started the procedure, opening the door. The plane was still moving when this was going on. We spent probably about 30 to 40 seconds before they opened the door, and I can't speak for everybody else, but it was pretty nerve-wracking to know that the door wasn't opening and know that something was on fire.
I was completely asleep, and when I woke up, I was hearing screams and people crying, and I didn't know how to react.
I heard like a bump, and I heard people screaming, running to the front. I'm like, what's happening? So I turn around and look in the window, and it's like flames all over the turbine of the plane. So I tried to calm my sister down and said, okay, wait, relax, let's think, and start walking out.
Hi, I'm Gina McCarthy, Administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. EPA's mission is to protect human health and the environment, and we do that by following the law and the latest science. Right now, science is telling us that there's no greater threat to our health, our economy, and our way of life than climate change. No matter who you are, where you live, or what you care about, climate change is affecting you and your family today. That's why we're taking action now. Under President Obama's leadership, our country has made major progress to cut carbon pollution, increase energy efficiency, innovate, and prepare for the future. And EPA's Clean Power Plan has put the country on track to slash carbon pollution from our power plants by 32% below 2005 levels. All of this work will lead to billions of dollars in benefits and help us avoid thousands of premature deaths and tens of thousands of asthma attacks in 2030. So we're making progress, but there's much more to do, and that's where you come in, because everyone has a role to play in this fight against climate change.
Nearly half of the U.S. states have jointly sued the Environment Protection Agency, or the EPA, over Barack Obama-initiated Clean Power Plan. According to West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Murphy, 23 of the 50 states filed the lawsuit with the Federal Court of Appeals. They charged that the EPA plan was illegal and damaging to the economic interests of their states. The same Attorney General said he has the responsibility to protect the lives of millions of working families from such illegal and unconscionable federal government action. U.S. President Barack Obama introduced the Clean Power Plan this August, with other policies aimed at curbing power plant carbon emissions by 32% in the next 15 years. The plan seeks to heavily regulate coal and other fossil fuel power plants.
Privacy advocates have been fighting a bill in the Senate called the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act. The bill is meant as a safeguard for cybersecurity, think protecting companies and the government from hacks. But opponents say the broad language in the bill flies in the face of privacy concerns and will actually help the government spy on us.
The Center for Medical Progress has released a new video from their investigation into Planned Parenthood's illegal harvesting of baby body parts for a profit. The latest video shows a Planned Parenthood doctor describing a partial birth abortion procedure to terminate living late-term babies, a practice that's illegal under federal law.
So usually what I do is if it's a breech presentation, I'll remove the extremities first, the lower extremities, and then go for the spine and sort of break it down that way.
Dr. Dermish also admits she's striving to harvest brain tissue.
I haven't been able to do that yet.
Oh, to get the calvarium?
Intact.
It's like maybe next time.
I know, right? Well, this will give me something to strive for.
Planned Parenthood is currently under congressional investigation.
Jordan Woolley originally answered the question, there is a God, in two ways.
I said that it was a fact or opinion.
Two ways because?
Based on my religion and based on what I think and believe, I did not think that it was a commonplace assertion.
Woolley says her 7th grade reading teacher said both her answers were wrong and that Woolley had to admit God wasn't real.
I didn't really know what to do, so first thing I did was tell my mom.
Jordan's mom, Chantel, couldn't believe it.
That a kid was literally graded against her faith in God in a classroom. So who would want that to be known?
Today I was given an assignment in school that questioned my faith.
Jordan made sure all of Katy and beyond knew about what happened by testifying last night in front of Katy ISD's Board of Education meeting.
So the kids were like caught in a catch-22. If they argued for their faith, then they were being told that they were arguing against their faith, and that happened in the classroom.
Today, Katy ISD released a statement saying in part that the assignment was intended to encourage critical thinking and dialogue and not question any student's religious beliefs. Quote, still, this does not excuse the fact that this ungraded activity was ill-conceived, and because of that, its intent had been misconstrued.
I love reading personally, so for me to have to fail reading because of what my beliefs are just shocks me.
This morning, a powerful storm system that pummeled the south is also on the move. Moisture from the remains of Hurricane Patricia is moving towards the Midwest and the east. The storm already battered the Gulf Coast with record-breaking rain. David Begnaud is in Spanish Fort, Alabama, with a continuing threat of coastal flooding. David, good morning.
Charlie, good morning. This is the Mobile metro area, and it was a miserable Monday here. Record-breaking, too. They got nearly 5 inches of rain, breaking a record set back in 1918. It is all part of the 5-day weather event that has pummeled the Gulf Coast.
Violent storms pounded the Gulf Coast Monday. A dangerous mix of strong winds and up to 14 inches of rain flooded streets and left thousands of people without power. In Pride, Louisiana, crews rescued 20 school children from a bus that had become stranded on a flooded bridge.
Is there water, you think, in there with them?
In Baton Rouge, the capital city, Jeanette Franklin and her 12-year-old son were trapped in their car by rising floodwater. Logan Jean and Bobby Malbrough came to their rescue.
Without them, I don't know if any of us could have really made it out of there the way we did.
You can't just drive by people who are stuck in the middle of the road with their kids and wave like nothing's ever happened. So we just got out, helped, and did everything we could.
In Mississippi, many roads were left impassable. And in Alabama, high tides tore apart this pier.
Around 11 a.m. Monday, there were wind gusts of nearly 30 miles per hour here in Spanish Fort, Alabama, as the strong winds drove water from the Gulf across the seawall, flooding a roadway that runs right under Interstate 10.
In Mobile, Felix's restaurant closed early for lunch. Employees there walked out with their shoes in hand.
What a difference 15 hours makes. This is where we were standing yesterday. It was waist deep, and now it is barely ankle deep. The weather is headed to the north, so cities like St. Louis, Washington, D.C., heads up. It is headed your way.
Scientists are still trying to determine whether flying object TB-145 is a comet or an asteroid. Dr. Edwin Krupp, director of the Griffith Observatory, told me with such a unique orbit and unusually high encounter velocity of 22 miles per second, it could be either.
Comets in particular very often have highly elongated orbits, sort of hot dog shaped orbits. They spend a lot of time far from the sun, a little bit of time close to the sun. This particular object has an orbit that's more like a comet than an asteroid, which is a little closer to circular.
The 1,300-foot wide space object will be closest to Earth, about 1.3 times the distance of the moon, or 300,000 miles away, on October 31st. The distance is relatively close by celestial standards.
The magnitude 7.5 quake struck the Hindu Kush mountainous area, and it also rattled neighbouring Pakistan, India and Tajikistan. It claimed 115 lives in Afghanistan, 248 in Pakistan and 2 in Indian-controlled Kashmir. In the Afghan capital Kabul, electric power and communications were temporarily interrupted and some buildings sustained damage. Officials say rescue work is facing extreme difficulties as roads linking the quake-hit areas are still blocked by landslides. Continued rainfalls and low temperatures are also adding to their woes. Meanwhile, in neighbouring Pakistan, the quake caused mudslides and road damage in the northwest region.
Survivors from Monday's magnitude 7.5 earthquake in Afghanistan emerged from a third night without shelter on Thursday. The quake has killed nearly 390 people while levelling thousands of homes and forcing many to camp out in the open. Video footage showed a landslide in Hunza village, northern Pakistan, after the quake hit on Monday. The landslide killed a local teacher who was on her way home from school. It brought up massive amounts of dust and blocked a road next to the valley. About 11,000 houses were damaged in northwestern Pakistan, but infrastructure hasn't suffered widespread damage. Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif said a relief package would be announced once damage has been assessed.
Amnesty International is calling on Israel to end its unlawful killings of Palestinians in the occupied territories. The rights group, in its latest report, has spotted a clear pattern of lethal force being used by Israeli soldiers in dealing with Palestinians. It says there is a growing trend of Israeli forces shooting to kill in completely unjustified situations. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, at least 64 Palestinians have lost their lives to the violence by Israeli forces and settlers since the beginning of October. The flare-up sees its riots in Israel's numerous attacks on the Al-Aqsa Mosque revered by Muslims. The aggression then triggered a series of run-over and knife attacks against Israelis. Now Amnesty is asking Tel Aviv to bring all those responsible to justice, but it also points to faults with Israel's justice system, saying that it serves to perpetuate impunity for unlawful killings of Palestinians.
Weeks since the first clash broke out, there is no sign that this wave of violence is going to end anytime soon. Trouble began in mid-September at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in East Jerusalem, as an increase in Jewish visitors to the site along with Palestinians, who fear Israel is seeking to change rules to forbid Jews from praying there. Attacks and unrest quickly spread deeper into Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. Israel insists that the surge in violence is brought about by Palestinian incitement, but Palestinians say it's the result of frustration stemming from nearly 50 years of Israeli occupation. With more bloodshed each day, the Palestinians are taking their case to the United Nations top rights body. During a special meeting of the UN Human Rights Council on Wednesday, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas made this appeal.
We call on the Security Council more urgently than any time before to set up a special regime for international protection of the Palestinian people immediately.
Abbas also accused Israel of carrying out extrajudicial killings of defenseless Palestinian civilians. He warned that allowing the current situation to continue would dash the hope for the two-state solution designed to make peace between Israelis and Palestinians. UN Human Rights Chief also voiced alarm, saying the violence could lead to a catastrophe if not stopped immediately.
Israel has to be assured its security for good, and the occupation which has caused the Palestinian people such intense suffering for almost 50 years, the occupation must end.